Today's date is September 27th, 2022. Time is now 7 p.m. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 1, adoption of the agenda as submitted, and this is for possible action. If somebody wants to make a motion. Joe, motion by Joe, second by Laurel. Any public discussion? Any board discussion about the motion? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Please join us for the flag salute being led by Stacy Wilkie McCulloch. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 3, superintendent report. And this is for information only. Superintendent Fueling.
Thank you, President Varner. Good evening, trustees. First this evening, we have some special guests from the Carson High School court, the King and Queen, and we have Ann Britt here from the high school to introduce us.
Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight. Homecoming just got over just a little while ago, and I'd like to introduce our homecoming king. This is Caden Brown. I'll let him speak for just a moment.
Thank you. I'm Caden Brown, and the homecoming this year was different from the other years, but I really liked it because, you know, even though it's not the tradition, but I was still able to see my friends almost immediately after my name was called, and that was my favorite part by far. And it was unreal. Yeah. Oh, I used to want to go into the military. That's still a possibility, but the more and more I try in school, the more I like it. So I plan to take the Promise Scholarship and go to WNCU. So, yeah.
Congratulations. Any comments from the board?
I just want to say congratulations. It's, was it back in 2014, my son had that honor, so it's kind of cool. I mean, the whole process is, I think it's interesting, and you probably get exposed to people and different things that maybe you don't normally, I'm assuming, get exposed to, you know, but it's a unique experience, so congratulations to you.
Sorry.
I also want to congratulate you, and I think you made the right choice. I know you're going to be treated well, so make sure you reach out to your mentors, and you're going to be in good shape.
Sydney King was also crowned as our homecoming queen, and she is unable to make it tonight because she has a soccer game. So all of our kiddos that are busy, hard to get here. Our week went well. There was a lot of smoke that week, so we had to cancel a lot of nighttime events. But we are planning a week coming up here. We're going to have a Beat Douglas week when we play them for football. So we're going to have some of those activities one night during that week, our bonfire and our club fair and line dancing and all the things that we missed. We're going to cram into one night during that week. So we're excited about that.
Well, good. Congratulations again, and wish you the best of luck in whatever you choose to do. Yeah.
Thanks again for having us.
Thank you.
I feel like we should make every week be Douglas week, but thank you, Ms. Britt. So other items, one thing, I got some updated numbers today I was pretty excited about that I just wanted to share with you. We talked about kind of a renewed push towards volunteerism in the district, and the community has certainly responded to that. So at this point, district-wide, we have 292 approved volunteers in the district, which is a large number. I guess it was larger than I expected, and I wasn't really sure. We don't have that data from prior years as far as I'm aware. However, we have 89 that are still waiting to be processed. So the response has been so overwhelming. If you remember in the presentation on Raptor, there was a federal check, background check, but there's also a local one. And part of that is because the local information doesn't always make it up to the feds kind of in an expedited fashion. So it's both sides of that. Well, at the local level, they're having a hard time keeping up with the number of applications that are coming and the number of checks that they have to do. So it's a good problem to have, but still, hopefully over time we'll get that quicker as they adjust. So anyway, in total you have 381 volunteer applications that I guess are processed or in process at this point. So that's a good place to be. Last week we talked a little bit about issues with transportation for athletics or just really any extracurricular activities. I wanted to thank Ann Sear and Mr. Russell for their work trying to put something together so that we could allow parents to transport kids to events and help with some of that, just some not the best situations with students having to leave early from class to get to some events. So that hopefully will help mitigate some of that issue. Last Wednesday, we had the first community PLC of the month with last kind of final opportunities for everyone to look at the draft language of the strategic plan, and we got plenty of feedback, so that was great, and we are taking that back now to look at that. Here in the near future, we'll be presenting a draft strategic plan to you for consideration and feedback before we come back for a final for approval. Last thing, tomorrow is a minimum professional learning day. All the school schedules are on the websites if parents aren't aware, community members are not aware. But that is all I have for today.
Thank you very much. That's great news about the volunteers. I know that their push was to get more parents and guardians in the schools and volunteers, so that's really great. We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 4, board reports and comments. We'll start with Carson High.
Hi, I'm Ava Schofield, and before I start, I'd like to apologize for the attire. I just got back from playing tennis, so sorry about that. Anyway, so we just wrapped up our homecoming week, and as Ms. Britt said, we crowned Caden Brown and Sydney King as homecoming king and queen, so that was super exciting. And then we have our Beat Douglas week coming up on the week of October 10th through the 14th. So we're excited for that. Hopefully we can beat Douglas in football again this year. And then just our fall sports, football has some more games, so they know if they find out if they're going to regionals and stuff. And that same goes for cross country, volleyball, girls and boys soccer, and girls golf. And then girls tennis, we qualified for regionals this year as a team. And the boys are sending a few for individual regionals, so that's super exciting. We're excited to see how we all compete for that. And that is all for this little week, whatever. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good presentation. Thanks. Oh. We'll go ahead and move on to Pioneer.
Okay, couldn't figure out how to push a button. Hi, good evening. I'm Aaliyah Berwoman. This week, or what's going on now, is Project Discovery Ropes course trips are on September 27th and the 29th. The Pioneer Family Night and Rock Creek Dinner on September 29th. Speech and debate competes at DeMonte Ranch High School. Dates on October 13th and 14th. The yearbook/media club will meet starting in October. The Pioneer Greenhouse was completed over the summer with a grant from Rich Perry with the Carson City Rotary Organization. Corey King from the Greenhouse Project provided the blueprints and labor to build the structure along with Miss Kristen Steinkraus, Pioneer staff, students, and Mark Kornick with Carson City School District operations. That concludes the student announcements for Pioneer Academy.
Thank you very much. Do you have anything growing in the greenhouse yet? Soon. You're just reading it. I understand. We'll go ahead and move on to the Nevada Association of School Boards. Any announcements?
I don't have one, but I think it would be fitting to ask Laurel to explain the NIAA parent representative process that she's been working on for, I don't know, it feels like the last year, Laurel.
Been a while. So they have changed the and opened up new seats on the NIAA governing board. And so there is a parent representative position available. The parent must be a parent of a student currently enrolled in an NIAA sport, and they must not be related to anyone who is an employee of the district. So those are some limiting factors. And then the term is for 3 years. And Clark and Washoe County each get 1 parent representative, and the other 15 counties get to narrow it down to 1. So we do have a form if you know of any parents who are interested in serving as the parent representative. There's an application to fill out, and then NASB will help make the decision with the 15 counties among the applicants that come in for that.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and move on to announcements from the board. Trustee Walker,
I have no report this evening.
thank you. Trustee Cassiopo,
No, the Pioneer student stole my thunder, so that's fine, which is perfectly fine. I will just make a plug, as I typically do, that, it's October and the Scoop, if anyone's interested in college or trade schools, it's a lot of information about monies that are offered to students who want to continue on with a college or career path after high school. So if you're interested, take a look. There's a lot of generous donors out there that are willing to provide scholarships or money in other forms to help students proceed with their education in whatever field they want to go to. So just a reminder that it's not too early to start thinking about that.
thank you. Trustee Wilkie McCulloch,
I have an update from Empire School by Principal Tuttle. He wanted to let us know his 3 primary focuses for their school improvement plan this year are: 1, creating an even safer and more welcoming place for our students to be included, at least 1.5 hour each day dedicated to 5 SEL competencies. Also, the establishment of common behavior expectations school-wide and the increase of our knowledge of restorative practices and actions. Number 2, increase our level of instructional focus by confirming in every lesson that our students know that what there's expected to learn, why they are there learning it, and our students understand what successful performance looks like. And 3, to overcome historical low scores in math. Another point of emphasis is our focus on claim, evidence, and reasoning in our math writing and interventions to improve our math facts fluency. They've aligned their resources and professional development for these improvements in these critical areas. This is the Empire's next level, making great things happen.
thank you. Trustee Carini,
From Dr. Conley at Eagle Valley Middle School. We raised almost $1,000 for the Alzheimer's Association. Our staff participated in a data dive into our SBAC scores and brainstorm ways to support students of all academic levels. Our after-school homework support club and after-school book club will begin Tuesday, October 4th. We are grateful to be able to provide students with snacks. And then lastly, our Lego robotic club is off and running. We have 3 full teams this year.
thank you. Trustee Ramirez,
I don't have a report specifically, but I do want to give a big shout out to Mr. Chambers. He had an amazing turnout of parents for their open house, so it was wonderful. It was the gym was completely packed, and there were people lined up on the side, so it was a beautiful turnout. We hope that they continue attending events at the high school.
thank you. Trustee Crossman,
Okay, for Fritch Elementary School, Mr. Brown would like to remind everyone that tomorrow is Picture Day. So look your best, smile, do your thing. For Fremont Elementary School, Dr. Ward would like to let everyone know that tomorrow morning at 7:30, there is a PTA meeting in the Fremont Library, and they are really looking for volunteers to come and help with the Fremont PTA. They are in need of a president and a vice president. So if you are active in the PTA at Fremont, attend the meeting and opt for vice president is my recommendation, because then you only have to fill in if the president's not there. If you're not there, they might make you president while you're not there. So, but it's such a good thing to, it's PTAs and PTOs are such a great way for parents to be involved, and they do provide support to teachers and to students and so many different things. The first Lego Robotic Club at Fritch Elementary School was started through the PTA. So I hope that she has some good turnout tomorrow morning. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. I have a report from Bordwick Bray, Principal Raqueta. Wednesday, tomorrow is a minimum day at dismissal at 12:40. Thursday, September 29th is a picture day. Their cookie dough fundraiser begins Monday, October 3rd, and runs through the 17th. Students will bring home information on Friday. They're looking for volunteers to help with the project. If you'd like to sign up to help, please see the Parent Square message that went out. On Wednesday, October 5th, is their next continuous improvement plan meeting, and they would love to have some parent volunteers for this team. And they want to say, please attend if you're interested, and it runs from 3:30 to 5:30 in the school library. And that concludes my report. Thank you. Go ahead and move on. And item number 5, any association reports? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to public comment. In making public comment, speakers are asked to come to the table or podium, sign in, speak into the microphone, identify themselves for the record. Commenters are instructed to limit their comments to no more than 3 minutes and not simply repeat comments made by others. And the comments should be made in reference to something under the jurisdiction of the school board. Go ahead and call for public comment now. Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on to agenda item number 7, discussion and possible action to approve proposed changes to CCSD policy 219, English learner programs. And this is the second reading and it's for possible action. And as Dr. Scott will be making the presentation. Welcome back.
Good evening, President Varner, members of the board. I'm circling back to correct some of the typographical errors that we encountered last time for the second reading and proposed adoption of the policy.
I didn't know if you had any comments to make or not.
I
Okay.
don't really have anything to add at this point. When I was here 2 weeks ago, I was smiling. I'm still smiling. I will say that, again, the impetus for this was just the vernacular and the vocabulary has changed in the policy at the state and I would say at the federal level. So just kind of trying to make our vernacular and our terminology in our handbook and in the reg and in the policy congruent with what really are the what reflects current pedagogical practices.
Thank you. Comments from the board? Any other comments for the motions made?
I actually do have a couple of recommendations on the second page. Under alignment, the vision and mission for the CCSD, and then there's another acronym, ELP. Would it be possible to spell that out so it is consistent with the wording under purpose? So that it will read English Learner Program instead of the acronym?
Yes, It was
Just to
my,
be consistent.
yes, it was my understanding that the first time that the terminology was used, that, and the
have
acronym
to
was
do it again.
stated after
Okay.
that, it was appropriate to state just the acronym. But
Okay.
if not, that was my understanding in grammatical terms or literary terms,
Okay.
that the first time that you use the
It's okay.
terminology and you
Okay.
cite the acronym, that
I just-
unless it's at the beginning of a sentence, that you would then use the acronym. But
Okay.
if not,
So if that's okay, then that's fine. Then the other recommendation would be on the second to last paragraph, where it says they will establish their own vision. I wonder if we could replace they with students. I'm assuming we're talking about the students, correct? Students, they will establish their own vision. Could we say students instead of they? It's on the second to last paragraph on the same page, page number 2.
Not sure where we're at.
It's the first page of the policy and the second, it's the second page because of the cover page, but the first page of the policy, the second to last paragraph, CC, SD, ELs will work together as partners each day with their teachers and will be empowered to reach their highest potential in all academic areas.
And then it
They
says
will
they.
establish, and she's wondering if we should change they to students.
I can see that now, that it might be an issue of, no,
I was,
of
I was
like,
thinking, I was counting that as
No.
the second page.
I can see it. No, we could certainly change that. I see it. I see what you're saying. It's a matter of what we call anaphoric reference. It's like, who are they referring, who is the they? So yes, we could.
Those were my only
Yes,
recommendations.
I
Go
agree.
ahead, Joe.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and call for a motion.
I'll make a motion. I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve September 27, 2022 as a revised date for policy 219, English Learner Program, with the recommendations made this evening.
Second.
I have a motion by trustee Cassiopo and a second by Lupe Ramirez, right? Any board discussion on the motion? Seeing none, any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Scott.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead and move on to agenda item number 8. Discussion on newly proposed CCSD policy 830, conservation and sustainability. This is the first reading for discussion only, and presenter will be Mr. Mark Cornick.
Good evening, President Varner, trustees, executive staff. My name is Mark Cornick. I'm the Director of Operations for the district. Thank you for the opportunity to present on the proposed Board Policy 830, Conservation and Sustainability. I provided a timeline in your packet. It's the first page. It's that squiggly, colorful one. I used this presentation a few times, once at the U.S. Green Building Council Rocky Mountain Chapter Conference and many other regional and national conference I spoke at. You can see we started sustainability and energy efficiency with daylighting, LED trials, and 2 megawatts of solar that we built in 2011. 2012 brought the strategic plan. And after the plan was developed, I was assigned to start a committee, which I did with Ben Contine, who ran that committee at the time. And it was called the Sustainability Action Team. This was to see where we stood in sustainability and to move sustainability forward. In 2017, we refreshed the strategic plan. The results and the progress of the Sustainability Action Team is in your packet, the next couple pages. The next page states the Sustainability Action Team mission statement. It states the definition that we gave it, and then we had 3 goals. The first goal was to be a sustainability management plan for the district. Once we got into committee with folks, we decided that it was better to go forward in the second and third goal and build some momentum, getting teachers involved, staff involved, and encouraging STEM and career education. So we're at this, we've accomplished those. We're at this first goal now, which is to start that plan. And to begin that plan, we start with a board policy. The next page points out a couple statements that are in the strategic plan that talk about sustainable efforts. In the following page, I pulled out words out of all the different goals and found so many of them that pertain to sustainability and conservation that I just listed them here. On the third page is a strategy, the third page is a goal. It's one of the strategies and goal for curriculum that matters. And this is a goal supporting sustainable development. Our next steps toward this policy came after a partnership was formed with the Green Schools National Network in November of 2018. In February following that, in 2019, we had a sustainability leadership conference with a 2-hour presentation by Dr. Jenny Seidel, who is the executive director of Green Schools National Network. We began that in the evening community PLC, and the subject is what is sustainability? And the presentation was done to about 35 people that attended. And I believe you were there, President Varner, as well as Trustee Carini, and I think you were there too, Trustee Walker. About 3/4 of those folks joined us the next day at Western Nevada College to continue the summit and flow mapping and goal setting. I remember the next day, we were doing some flow mapping, and Dr. Conley from Eagle Valley Middle School was leading one of those groups. And as he built his flow map, it wasn't really a pretty thing, but it ended up with a greenhouse right on the top. We built that greenhouse this year, and an ag program was born in CTE at Eagle Valley. It was a dream come true for Dr. Conley. One of the goals that came out of this summit after reflection meetings with Mrs. Kima, Mr. Fueling, Dr. Seidel, and myself was to review policies from other catalyst districts in the Green School Network and present to our board a policy to our board supporting and prioritizing initiatives. It took a while, thank you to COVID, but here it is. A year later, in January of 2020, we received a $750,000 grant for 3 years from Tesla. This was to help Empire, did help Empire and Eagle Valley Middle School reach some of their goals and add Project Recharge and the programs to our schools, as well as furthering existing partnerships. So with that, I respectfully submit this to the board for your review, and I'll attempt to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments?
A statement if I can. I had asked Mr. Kornick a couple of questions before the meeting, and I wanted to thank him for responding. You know, and his responses were satisfactory to me. I was curious. I mean, we've been doing this for a while, and one of my questions to Mark was, why do we need a policy? We do this already. And his comment, and I agree with it, was it's providing legitimacy to the work that the people in this district have been doing. And we've done good things as a district. And when we look at sustainability and energy efficiency, Mark has spearheaded a lot of that. And we've seen actual financial savings as a result of that, the photovoltaic arrays and things like that. So I think we've got people that really care about this and have done good work. And anyway, long story short, I asked him that. I asked him, if this is going to have any potential cost to the district. And he was good enough to point out that not only is it not going to have any cost to the district, but this has saved a tremendous amount of money. So I just wanted to make sure that got on record, and thank you for your responses.
Thank you, Trustee Casiopo. Appreciate it.
Stacy?
So you have mission statement and goals. Do you think it maybe that we need to make it more a part of our strategic plan? Because it is pretty, I mean, it's integrated with the phrases you said, but you've done a lot with it. And if you ever retire and the next person comes in and is not as excited and it's enthusiastic, I kind of worry that we don't have it in our strategic plan to continue. So I don't know if that's something.
I would assume that's up to the committee that's writing the strategic plan. I kind of stood up and said that we needed to do this back then, and they said, okay, well, go ahead and go for it. And so I appreciated that. And it's, as I told Mr. Casiopa, there's 90 people on our email list right now. We're anticipating 30 people at our meeting on Thursday at Eagle Valley. And a lot of them are community partners. And we built that mission to support the strategic plan. And that's, I mean, when we go into these meetings, we try to build that around it and ask that question. Does this support the plan? So it sounds like it makes sense, but I don't know.
Okay.
Mr. Walker? I'm sorry.
more.
Oh, I'm sorry, Stacy.
I just wanted to thank you for all the work that you've done in this area too, because when we went to the national conference, they even knew about some of the projects that we were doing, and that meant a lot. So thank you for your enthusiasm and your dedication to this project.
Trustee Walker?
You know, what I like about this work, Mark, is that it's really motivating for the students. And so, and I know I've told you this before, but when we got those solar panels at Carson Middle School, I had a group of kids who every day came up to me at lunch talking to me about how there was some little machine that calculated the energy that was saved. And they would come and talk to me about that it was incorrect. And I'd be sitting there like, I'm just trying to make sure these kids are following the rules. I don't know what to tell you about this. So, I mean, I think that we're taking this to the next level. It is of interest for the students. It is motivating for them. It's going to lead them into career fields that probably we haven't imagined yet. And so that's a great part of this, is that the students were bringing this to my attention as an administrator before I even knew how to explain it to them. So, and now they could probably come and explain it to me so I'd understand what the argument was.
Yeah, I think there's other people around that could explain that more as far as education goes, but I have been invited, it's my 4th year, to go to Eagle Valley for a day, and it started out 6 classes, and last Friday I did 5 tours of the solar panels, and each year we work something into it. This year we worked in, how do we maintain those panels? Well, we have a consultant that has a drone, and he flies the drone over and he does thermal camera images, and so he can see where heat's being released. So instead of checking every panel, he knows right where there's a problem. So it's another technology item that, you know, kids are super interested in. They really like the drone. They could care less kind of about the panels, but once we got them over there and they saw how they worked inside, they were pretty excited. So I agree. It's really satisfying to see the light bulb go on when the kids see this stuff.
Go ahead, Laurel.
Just a comment I was going to make. I like adopting this, the idea of putting this into a policy. I think that even has more weight than what we have in the strategic plans. Strategic plans change based on interest, but if this is a policy that we regularly maintain within the district, this is going to be how we continue to operate, even when eventually you retire, but not for a while maybe.
I just have 2 quick things. On the title page, discussion of newly proposed policy 830, it says conversation and sustainability. It should be conservation, I believe, right?
Mr. President, but isn't that just the document for the board? It's not in the policy.
Okay. Then on the policy, the only suggestion I have is on paragraph 2, the Director of Operations or designee shall prepare a report to be submitted to the board. I think the terminology we've been trying to use is Board of Trustees, is that correct?
Sorry, it is, but on page 1, we spell it out, the Carson City School District Board of Trustees, and then parenthetically, we say board, so I think we're covered.
Okay, that'd be fine. And that's all I had. But, any other comments before we move on?
I did have one that I noticed on the back page when I was reading through it today. At the bottom of the second page, it said that efforts that have been implemented or revised in the district for the preceding fiscal year. But if we're doing it every other year, it probably should say since the last report period. And I would look to Trustee Crossman to correct me on that.
Yes, he's good at that. Any other comments or questions? If not, Mr. Cornick, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 9, presentation and possible adoption of the district-wide restorative discipline plan for the 2022-2023 school year as required by NRS 392-466, or excuse me, 4644 for possible action, and Mrs. Fuzon will be presenting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Varner, members of the board, Tasha Fuson for the record. I believe you are all familiar with our district's plan for restorative discipline. We're going into our 3rd year with this plan. The process that we use for the revisions, as every school is required to gather a team together. That team is required to have administrators, support staff, teaching staff, and then parents and students if the student is, or if it's a middle school or high school. So the sites then review the plan as well as their discipline data from the previous year, and they make suggested revisions to the plan for me to bring to you to the board for approval. So that is a process we've done for the review. In addition to that, I get together the Ed Services Division directors, and we go through it as well to see if there's any updates that need to be made based on our respective areas. So that is typically representation from the EL department, special ed department, curriculum department, accountability department. So we do an actual internal review of it as well to make sure it's still consistent with the reporting practices that we have to have within our each respective areas. So just kind of, we'll do a quick walkthrough, and then I'll point out where the suggested additions were, changes. On page 1, we have our standard introduction, just explaining basically the philosophy of restorative practices for our district. Halfway through the page, the next section talks about what restorative practices are. That was actually added the last time we met, so last year around this time, because that was a change in state law in the 2021 legislative session. So moving on to page 2, we have a listing of prevention and intervention strategies utilized within the district. We've broken those down into different categories for communication and supervision, and then intervention and activities. So at the bottom of page 2, you'll see in red, one of the teams requested that we go ahead and add restorative discipline plans as determined by site intervention teams. So one of the changes we saw in the last legislative session is that we actually are required to write a plan for restorative discipline for students who are exhibiting chronic misbehavior, if you will. And so even though this entire plan talks about restorative discipline, the team felt we probably needed to add the specific plan to that as an intervention, so it made sense to me. On page 3, it was actually requested as well then that we add support provided by our Native American liaisons. So we do have Native American liaisons in a couple of our schools, and those folks work to work with students in the tribe, and they provide tutoring services and actually like mentoring type support as well. So we added that as requested. In the middle of page 3, the next part talks about classroom restorative discipline. So each teacher is also required to write a classroom discipline plan. That's not a new concept. Most of our teachers have always had a discipline plan. The difference is that teachers were required to take a different spin on that. Instead of saying, I'm going to warn you once, I'm going to warn you twice, I'm going to call your mom, and then I'm going to send you up to the office. Instead it was, okay, well, how can we be restorative in nature? So, if Lupe happened to, kick Dawn right at recess, then maybe the more appropriate action would be to have Lupe apologize to Dawn, right? Versus go to the office, that kind of thing, because we want to teach appropriate behavior. We want our students to be held accountable for their actions, but in a reasonable manner. So teachers are required to write those restorative discipline plans as well. We also have social emotional learning, or SEL, curriculum in all of our schools. And so we use that to teach appropriate behavior, pre-teach. And then at the bottom of page 3, it talks about administrative interventions. At the top of page 4, there was a couple additions in here. There was a request to add, and I kind of resequenced this. This is why you'll see 1 and 3 are new, but it made sense to me in this logical order, which is why it might seem odd unless you were thinking the same way I am. But that number 1 says previous attempts to support, intervene, redirect, and educate students to engage in appropriate student conduct. So an administrator, before taking administrative action for discipline, right, you're looking at what have we done to support our students prior to this time, right? And then the level of progression on the continuum. The third one was added, implementation of a plan of action based on restorative justice. So do we have a restorative plan in place? Have we already written one? And then implementation of an IEP. There are requirements under IDEA that we have to make sure we're meeting those provisions. And then the degree of the violation, so how severe is the behavior, and then is there NRS that addresses that behavior as well. So those were additions to that piece. That page further goes on to talk about the multi-tiered systems of support model that we have in our district, which is basically interventions at a tier 1 level, PBIS, positive behavioral intervention supports. You'll hear many of our schools start to talk about how they might have like dolphin bucks, at Borderwick Bray, and students are earning tickets for, being kind, and then they can use it as student store kind of thing. So almost all of our schools have those systems in place, and those who haven't will be coming on with training next year. So at the end of next year, all 10 of our schools will have gone through at least a 1 year of training on tier 1 interventions for behavior. So that's part of what we're working on with MTSS right now. If you move to page 5, you'll see it talks about the restorative discipline plan distribution. We are required to send out this plan after it's approved by the board to all of the employees in our district. And we also have to post it on the individual school websites as well as the district website. So we send that out, and then teachers are required to actually explain to the students in the class what the behavioral expectations are. We also do staff training. So each of our schools, after this is adopted, during one of their professional learning days, will go through the steps of progressive discipline restorative actions with their staff, so they understand and plan themselves. The next section is plan for the temporary removal of a pupil from the classroom in accordance with 392.4645, .4646, .4647, and .4648. So there's a succession of NRS that applies to removing a student. Here's where you're going to see most of the changes. And these changes are actually changes that I put into the plan because I thought it needed to be spelled out more specifically what the law provides for. So in this particular situation, this case is when a teacher says that this student's behavior is so egregious that I can't continue teaching. And state law then requires that we remove the student from that class, put them in a temporary alternative environment, which in our district we call in-school suspension. So it's not out-of-school suspension. We find them a different place within the school environment. In an elementary school, that usually looks like the vice principal's office, like right outside the vice principal's office, a little chair and desk. In our secondary schools, they typically have a separate room for in-school suspension. We do notify the parent that the student was removed from class, and then the administrator is required to, of course, speak to the student and give the student an opportunity to respond. What happened in their own words, what was their defense? Did they do it? That kind of thing. So there's due process there. And then if the student is receiving special ed services, we are required to continue to provide those specially designed instruction services in an in-school suspension environment. On page 6, you'll see I crossed out an area, and that's where I had really, in the previous 2 plans, had summarized it in, like, I don't know, what is that, 5 sentences, and decided, no, this really needs to be explicitly spelled out. So that's what you're seeing in red. So within 3 days of removing the student from the school, the classroom, and putting them in school suspension, a parent conference has to be held. State law specifically dictates that the teacher who's requesting the removal of the student from the classroom needs to be at that conference and needs to explain to the parent why they are requesting that child to be removed from their classroom. Student then, of course, gets an opportunity to explain to the parent what's going on, their side of the story. And then upon the conclusion of that conference, the school administrator recommends whether or not to return the student to the class or maybe continue in school suspension for a short period of time or some other action. Sometimes it's out of school suspension, depending on the behavior. State law does require that if the student is a child in transition or covered under McKinney-Vento, that we take those considerations or take that into consideration as well when we develop the plan, right? Because we don't want to make sure that the nature of that student's circumstances aren't having an adverse effect on the reason why they're acting out. Now, here comes the big part, right? So if the teacher who then asked for that student to be removed disagrees with the site administrator, they basically get to appeal that, and each site is required to have a committee that then will then review that request for removal. The committee then actually just reviews the circumstances, the student side, the teacher side, and the committee then makes the determination whether or not to overrule the site administrator and say, no, the student needs to be removed from this teacher's classroom. That determination could be, oh no, we're going to move the student from this teacher's classroom into another teacher's classroom. It can be, no, the student needs to be removed from that teacher's classroom and stay in school suspension for X amount of time. Or the committee can say, no, we are saying that we're going to recommend that the student go to a discipline hearing and for consideration of a long-term suspension or an expulsion from the school. So that piece is very specific. Teachers have, like I said, an appeal right if they're saying that that student's behavior is so egregious and so making it difficult and impossible for the teacher to teach and run the classroom, then they have the ability to make that appeal to that committee. So then within the principal now has to get involved at that point in time. The principal serves on the committee. And the principal has to notify the parents that this committee is going to be held and that they're going to be reviewing the circumstances. And then within 24 hours of that committee meeting, the principal has to communicate with the family about what the outcome of that committee meeting was. NRS does require specific members on the committee. So the committee must have the principal. There must be 2 teachers and 1 alternative teacher, 1 staff member and 1 alternative staff member. And the teachers and the staff members have to be selected by their peers, and they serve a 2-year term. They can only serve 1 2-year term. So you can't keep re-upping and being on this committee, for extended time. So,
Sorry,
yes.
just because I know I'm going to forget. I just don't know the terminology. What's an alternate teacher or alternate staff member?
That means that so in case the 2 teachers that are serving on it don't happen to be there, it's just an alternate. Yeah. Yep.
Sorry,
That's okay. Yeah, it's just an alternative, person to serve in case there's not availability of those other folks. So that's what that means.
So, and why don't we have the social workers on each one of those committees? We have a couple of them, but not every school has a.
Because
social
the
worker.
school staff has the choice to select whom they want. NRS doesn't dictate that. It says it's a teacher or it's a staff member, and if your school site chooses your social worker, then the social worker serves on it. But they're not a standing required member. They would have to fill one of those other positions.
I was going to ask that question too, and I was just wondering why each school wouldn't want the social worker on there. I mean, we don't, as I understand it, right, we generally don't have counselors, behavioral specialists. Aren't they, in that case, wouldn't they be, I'm just asking, wouldn't they be the closest professional that might be able to wrap their head around the problem? That may be a teacher or administrator, you know, that's not necessarily their expertise. I don't know if I'm asking that intelligently, but I'm almost thinking
I
they
know
add
exactly what
something
you're
to it.
saying. I think it's situational depending on the school and depending on how their school functions or works, right? We have different personalities, different people in different roles. So I think it depends on, you know, sometimes, like for instance, right now we have 2 schools that don't have social workers or have brand new social workers. So in those particular cases, when they were coming up with their committees, they wouldn't have named a social worker. It wouldn't have even been considered because they didn't have people filling those positions at that time. So I think, like I said, it's up to the school to nominate who's in those roles, and then they serve those terms. But I mean, I think you see in most cases they put a social worker on there, but I did not ask the schools that didn't choose their social workers why they didn't choose their social workers. Yeah.
Tasha, that was going to be my question also, and I was just wondering, could we make a strong recommendation to the administrators, to the principal, to make that, to include that position with this committee? Because I think that the social worker input is instrumental to the outcome of the students'
So I would
issue.
be hesitant to do that because these are people that the teachers pick. So for me to make a strong recommendation that they pick whom I want them to pick, I think wouldn't necessarily be the spirit of what was intended by them selecting their representatives. I understand what you're all saying from a mental health perspective, but I don't want to influence who sites pick. I mean, they obviously know that their social workers are their mental health providers on campus.
And in some places, a lot of school counselors are, and I would imagine social workers, you know, they really try to stay out of the discipline realm of things. So, I mean, it's just, they try to do preventative as opposed to be part of consequences. So I could see some being uncomfortable to serve on that also.
I mean, we can always talk about it, and I'm happy to talk about it in our restorative meetings. But yeah, I think it's just one of those slippery slopes when you tell people who they need to nominate to represent them. It's kind of a hard position to be in. But you can see on pages 6 and 7, we're actually required to put within our plan, and 8, we're actually required to list who those folks are. That's a required component of this plan. And then in addition to that, on the bottom of page 8, the plan is required to spell out how, when we have to have a plan for placement of a pupil in a different school within the district in accordance with NRS 392.466. So if we say that a student needs to be removed from school A and is going to be placed at school B, we have to say what services and what structure the school that we want to remove the student to has that the original school doesn't have. So for instance, if we had a plan for removal of a student from Carson Middle to put into Eagle Valley, we would have to say, well, what can Eagle Valley provide that Carson Middle cannot? So that's required in NRS. You can't just go, oh, we're gonna shift this student. Now, there's some flexibility in there because you might be, you know, the comment might be, well, Tasha, right, has gotten in with a group of students that she's not making good decisions while at Carson Middle. So part of her plan for restorative discipline would be we need to remove her from that environment, and therefore placing her at Eagle Valley would be appropriate because it's a different peer group. We just have to specify why this placement's going to be better than that, right, instead of just moving kids around. So that's what that part's about. And then on page 9, we have a list of prohibited conduct and consequences. These come directly from policy, regulation 525. And we're at it actually at Stacy's request. The first year we put this plan out. So we put those definitions in there so everyone can be on the same page. On page 14, This is all in red, stakeholder input. One of the things that the state did last year when we submitted the plan is they got independent review teams together. They have a partnership with some folks from UNR, and so they reviewed district plans and they made recommendations. One of the recommendations we received as a district was to actually list our stakeholder input. So all of the folks that actually reviewed the plan at those sites and or at the district office, I then put a list of all of those folks. So that's who's in red, is all of the people at all of the sites that actually reviewed the plan and gave input. And then on page 17, I listed some associated documents. And the reason why is I thought it was important to call out that this is not the only guidance that we give schools when it comes to managing restorative or just discipline. So our CCSD Regulation 525 has, and you're going to go over that. You guys have seen that, I'm sure. We've reviewed it multiple times. It's something like 18 pages long. So there's a lot of guidance in there for schools. But we also have a CCSD restorative plan matrix that school administrators have, and that particular document literally lists out if a student comes to school inebriated, what are all the possible things you can do and what are all the required things you can do. So it has a matrix so that administrators can say, ooh, Tasha came inebriated, and therefore I have to call the parent. I have to, that kind of thing. So we have that document for them. We also have a CCSD bullying and cyberbullying manual that walks our administrators through each step from a legal perspective about what they have to do, including paperwork to utilize to make sure that we're following the letter of the law. We have also a CCSD accepted practice for restorative discipline. So I put together a 2-page document telling them, okay, if this happens, then you're going to first do this. You're going to get your team together. You're going to contact student support services. You're going to use this form. So I actually put together a direction, step-by-step directions for them. FBA stands for Functional Behavioral Assessment. I will spell that out. I'm just realizing that right now. Probably most people don't know what an FBA is. But it's Functional Behavioral Assessment. And what that is that's it's a 1-page document that helps teams work through trying to get to the core of behavior. So what this would look like is when we develop a plan of restorative discipline for a student who has chronic behavioral issues at the school, we would invite the parent to the table or guardian, the student, typically the school social worker and or counselors, school administrator, any teacher that works with the student. We get together as a team. The FBA walks things through like, well, what is the behavior? When is the behavior occurring? Is it occurring at lunch every day? What is the reason for the behavior? And that's why it's important to have the student there. Honey, if the student is like throwing rocks at other kids, and no matter what you do, you can't get the student to stop throwing rocks, just regular stop doing that isn't working. Right? Then you say to the student, well, why are you throwing rocks? Well, and then you try to find out, well, is it because, well, these kids are picking on me and they're bullying me, and that's the way I get back at them, because you're going to handle that in a different way than, well, I don't have friends, so I'm trying to get their attention. Okay, we're going to handle that in a different way. So you try to get to the core of what the behavior is, what's causing the behavior, when it's happening, so that then you can in turn come up with interventions, right? If Tasha's throwing rocks at people because Tasha doesn't feel like she has friends, well, then maybe we need to work on finding some friends for Tasha and work on some friendship skills, and maybe getting her little peer buddy that can have lunch, that kind of thing. So that's how we develop those plans, and that's what an FBA does. It's a series of questions that walks you through that. And then we actually have a restorative plan of action sample. So we've got a plan written out to give our disciplinarians at the sites, here's an idea of what this might look like, and here's things that you can do to intervene. So those are documents that accompany this plan, but aren't necessarily in the plan. So I wanted to make sure that they were listed out so that it was just another point to draw attention to the other tools that we have in that toolkit. So that is our plan in a nutshell. Any questions? I know. Any questions or suggestions? Anything like you would like to see added?
Go ahead, Laurel.
Sure, just real simple on page 6. After you introduce the committee, it'll be referred to as the committee. I would just capitalize committee in the rest of that in the rest of the 2 paragraphs.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, go ahead.
So Tasha, I was just curious, on page 6, the information you included in red, I don't have any issue with that. That's, you're all the experts on that. But I guess I'm wondering, what was the reason for getting rid of the parents will be informed within 24 hours? I just think, as a parent, if my kid was removed from class and put temporarily even, I'd want to know as soon as possible.
So I think they are going to be notified. I think what, that's interrupting it, if you look at the paragraph before, so that's in addition. So we notify them within 24 hours that the student's been removed. Then we have 3 days to actually schedule the face-to-face meeting.
I missed that. That's, yeah, I was just wanted to make sure we didn't lose that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Mike?
I'm prepared to make a motion that we accept the district-wide restorative discipline plan for the 22-23 school year as submitted in accordance with NRS Chapter 392.
Second, Wilkie.
We have a motion by trustee Walker, second by trustee Wilkie McCulloch. Any discussion about the motion before we move on to public comment? Seeing none, any public comment in reference to the motion? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Motion carries. Tasha, before you leave, I'd just like to say I'm really impressed with the presentations you always make. You always do such a good job. You explain things very well, easy to understand. And I just want you to know that I, and I think everybody else on the board, appreciates your presentations. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Move on to agenda item number 10, discussion on proposed changes to CCSD Regulation 525, student conduct and discipline. For discussion only, and Superintendent Fueling will make the presentation.
Good evening, trustees. Thank you, President Varner. Over the next hour and a half, I'm hoping to walk you through 3 minor changes, sorry. Regulation 525 is regarding student conduct and discipline. This was last updated in March in consultation with Anna Alexander, who helps represent us on some of these items. In a review of this, there were some title changes that were recommended, and really it's pretty minor edits through the document. So if you go to really starting on page 10, it's 10, 11, and 13 are the pages that have changes. And you'll just note that there's we initially had used the term student hearing officer, and there was some confusion with that and who that was in given situations. And so we put some more detail, just thinking through that process and what it needs to look like, noting the executive administrative assistant, in this case, Mrs. Cortez, director of adult education in this case, Mr. Sam Santillo, just helping us kind of get through this process. One of the other problems we had was the way it was written. The superintendent may be the hearing officer, but also be a part of the appeal process, which wasn't, it seems strange to have the person who is the final level of appeal also be a part of that initial appeal process. So really just cleaning up some of that language under short-term suspensions, the appeal, and then under the long-term suspension and expulsions, the hearing and appeal process through that. So I don't really have too much more to say other than it's some really changing of the titles within that discipline process under given circumstances. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board or comments? Seeing none. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Move on to agenda item number 11, approval of the consent agenda. We take a motion.
I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Get a motion by Don Craney and second by who? Mike Walker. Second by Mike Walker. Any board discussion on the motion? Any public comment to reference the motion? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Move on to agenda item number 12, informational items. Discussion only, no action will be taken. I think everybody's had the chance to read through those. Any questions, comments? Seeing none. We'll move on to agenda item number 13, request for future agenda topics. Anybody? Seeing none, thank you. Didn't have any? Okay. Then we'll move on to agenda item number 14, adjournment. And we're adjourned at 8:05. Thank you. Appreciate everybody showing up tonight. Thank all the board members.